The story begins with a striking contrast, two women standing on the same political stage, yet embodying entirely different energies. On one side, we see Melania Trump, graceful, composed, and deliberately distant, a first lady who often allowed silence to speak louder than words. On the other, Ivanka Trump, vibrant, articulate, and ever-present, standing confidently beside her father at rallies, boardrooms, and world summits. These images, so often replayed across news channels and splashed on magazine covers, created a fascinating tension in the public imagination. And so the question arises, why has the media time and again drawn comparisons between Melania and Ivanka? Why do these two figures, both powerful in their own right, become locked in a narrative of competition and contrast? Is it simply because they are women within a dynasty dominated by men? Or does the answer lie deeper in politics, ambition, and the delicate balance of influence inside the Trump family? This documentary seeks to explore those questions not with shallow gossip, but by peeling back the layers of image power and hidden rivalry. For Melania, her power was understated, expressed through elegance, distance, and careful control of her role as First Lady. For Ivanka, it was unmistakably direct speeches, policy discussions, and her father's open acknowledgement of her as a trusted advisor. The comparisons then were inevitable. They weren't just about fashion choices, though the world certainly dissected Melania's couture gowns against Ivanka's sleek corporate dresses. They weren't just about personality, though journalists often painted Melania as the enigmatic figure in contrast to Ivanka's polished accessibility. At the core, these comparisons were about power politics and the invisible struggles for influence within America's most polarizing family. This is where our journey begins, not merely to retell the headlines, but to understand the symbolism, the tensions, and the unspoken dynamics between Melania and Ivanka Trump. Two women, one family, and a stage called America. Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. In the public eye, Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump were not merely family members of a president, they became symbols, each embodying a different facet of the Trump legacy. Their images, so distinct yet intertwined, shaped how the world viewed the Trump administration and, more importantly, the internal dynamics of the family itself. For Melania, her role as First Lady was defined by restraint and silence. She rarely gave interviews, seldom revealed her emotions, and often appeared as a figure of elegance and distance. Unlike her predecessors, who made the East Wing a hub of activism and social reform, Melania preferred to remain in the background. When she did step forward, it was through carefully orchestrated appearances, walking silently by Donald Trump's side, maintaining a calm, almost impenetrable expression. To many, this quietness became her identity. Some admired her mystery and composure, interpreting it as strength. Others criticized her for being disengaged, even cold, at a time when the country expected a more vocal, empathetic First Lady. Her signature initiative, Be Best, was meant to define her legacy. Focused on children's well-being, online behavior, and anti-bullying campaigns, it carried noble intentions. Yet critics quickly pointed out its contradictions, especially considering Donald Trump's famously combative style on social media. To many observers, Be Best felt symbolic but shallow, a campaign more memorable as a slogan than as a movement that reshaped lives. While Melania defended it as her heartfelt contribution, the shadow of skepticism lingered, and the campaign's true impact remained contested. In stark contrast, Ivanka Trump embodied ambition and visibility. She was not a ceremonial figure, but an active participant in her father's administration. As senior advisor to the president, she took part in high-stakes policy discussions, sat across from world leaders, and represented the United States at global forums. Cameras captured her in boardrooms, international summits, and behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office itself. To her supporters, Ivanka symbolized a modern professional woman bridging politics and business. To her critics, she blurred the line between family loyalty and political power, wielding influence without accountability. The media, always hungry for narratives, framed her as the de facto First Lady of Donald Trump's presidency. While Melania's silence left a vacuum, Ivanka's constant presence filled it. Every time she accompanied her father abroad or offered polished statements on policy, journalists highlighted the irony: the daughter seemed to perform the very duties traditionally reserved for the wife. This perception, fair or not, deepened the sense of rivalry in the public imagination. Together, these contrasting images formed a dynamic that the public could not ignore. On one side, Melania, the quiet, elegant First Lady, whose guarded demeanor invited curiosity but kept her at a distance. On the other, Ivanka, the ambitious, polished advisor, stepping boldly into the political arena. Side by side, they represented two models of female power within the same family, one through silence, the other through visibility. And it was this very opposition that led the media and the public to constantly measure them against one another. Every gesture, every outfit, every public appearance became material for comparison. Was Melania truly distant or merely misunderstood? Was Ivanka genuinely powerful or simply playing the role her father allowed? These questions did not have simple answers, but the comparisons once planted grew into one of the most persistent storylines of the Trump era. When historians look back at the Trump presidency, one of the most fascinating dynamics they will examine is the question of political power inside the family. Beyond the rallies, the policies, and the controversies, there was always the lingering presence of two women whose roles were constantly contrasted, Ivanka Trump and Melania Trump. Each of them carried influence in very different ways, and the gap between their political footprints became one of the central narratives of Donald Trump's time in office. Ivanka was not just the president's daughter, she was one of his most trusted advisors. From the earliest days of the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump relied on her instincts, her polished demeanor, and her ability to soften his rougher edges with certain audiences. She was present in strategy sessions, lending advice on how to frame policy proposals and appeal to suburban women voters. And once Trump entered the White House, Ivanka's role only grew. She officially took the title of senior advisor to the president, but her real influence often stretched far beyond the formality of the position. Her fingerprints could be seen across multiple areas of governance. In matters of personnel, Ivanka was said to have had a voice in hiring decisions, particularly when it came to figures who shaped the administration's public image. In economic policy, she championed initiatives like paid family leave and workforce development, positioning herself as the socially conscious face of the administration. In foreign affairs, she became a visible presence, sitting in meetings with world leaders, accompanying her father on trips abroad, and even attending the G20 summit as a representative of the United States. To some observers, this was refreshing, a young woman stepping into arenas historically dominated by men. To others, it was alarming, a blending of family loyalty and political power that raised questions of nepotism and accountability. Her influence was further amplified by her marriage to Jared Kushner, another senior advisor to the president. Together, they were described as the power couple in the shadows. While Trump dominated the headlines, Ivanka and Jared quietly maneuvered within the administration, shaping decisions behind the scenes. Jared handled sensitive issues such as Middle East peace talks, criminal justice reform, and technology innovation. Ivanka balanced this by focusing on social policies and women's empowerment. The two of them, young, ambitious, and well-connected, became an axis of influence inside the White House, one that few could challenge openly. In stark contrast stood Melania Trump. Her role, though equally scrutinized, remained closer to that of a traditional First Lady. She chose not to immerse herself in policy debates or political battles. Instead, she focused on family, protecting her son Barron from the relentless glare of the media, maintaining the family's public image, and standing by her husband in moments of crisis. Her speeches were rare, carefully measured, and usually tied to symbolic events such as state dinners, holiday celebrations, or commemorations of national tragedies. To many, Melania represented grace and stability, the quiet counterpart to the chaos of Donald Trump's presidency. But compared to Ivanka's active engagement, Melania's distance from politics made her appear less influential. American media often highlighted this imbalance, portraying Ivanka as the unofficial First Lady while casting Melania in the shadow of her stepdaughter. Whether intentional or not, this framing shaped public perception. Ivanka was seen as the political actor, Melania as the ornamental figure. Of course, the reality was more complex. Melania's choice to remain distant from politics was in its own way a form of power. By refusing to be drawn into controversy, she preserved her independence and shielded her son. Yet the relentless comparisons with Ivanka made it difficult for her to step out of that shadow. Every article, every television segment, every photograph seemed to reinforce the same narrative: one woman ambitious and politically engaged, the other graceful but sidelined. And thus the image of imbalance became one of the most enduring storylines of the Trump years. It wasn't just about two women. It was about how America defines power, how it perceives influence, and how even within one of the most powerful families in the world, women are measured against each other in ways that men rarely are. When it comes to style and fashion, few political families have drawn as much global attention as the Trumps. Within this family, Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump became two contrasting yet equally captivating figures, both admired, both scrutinized, and both turned into fashion icons in their own right. Yet the way they expressed themselves through clothing told two very different stories. Melania, a former international model, carried with her the aura of high fashion long before she stepped into the White House. Having graced runways in Paris, Milan, and New York, she understood the language of couture better than most first ladies before her. Her wardrobe as First Lady was a continuation of that legacy, refined, elegant, and unmistakably European in taste. Whether it was a Dior gown for a state dinner, a Dolce & Gabbana coat during a diplomatic visit, or a sharply tailored Ralph Lauren suit, every piece seemed chosen not merely as clothing, but as a statement of grace and prestige. Fashion magazines around the world celebrated her as one of the most stylish first ladies in history, often placing her alongside icons like Jacqueline Kennedy and Michelle Obama. To her admirers, she embodied timeless sophistication, a woman who could turn any public appearance into a runway moment. Ivanka Trump, on the other hand, represented a very different aesthetic. Her fashion was not about couture glamour, but about projecting the image of a modern working woman. Blending femininity with authority, she often chose sleek sheath dresses, tailored blazers, and minimalist jewelry outfits that could move seamlessly from boardroom to international summit. Long before her father entered politics, Ivanka had already built her own fashion brand, one that mirrored her personal style, polished, accessible, and aspirational for career-driven women. Her looks communicated not only elegance, but also power, the kind of understated authority that reflected her role as both a business leader and a senior advisor in the White House. The contrast between them became a constant fascination for the press. Side by side, Melania's European luxury stood against Ivanka's pragmatic modernism. Headlines often played into this dynamic, asking provocative questions like, "Who is the real style icon of the Trump era?" These comparisons, while often framed as lighthearted, carried deeper undertones. For the media, fashion became another lens to explore the rivalry between the First Lady and the First Daughter, another way of measuring influence, image, and identity within America's most watched family. In the end, both women carved out their own spaces. Melania, with her couture glamour, elevated the role of First Lady into a global fashion spectacle. Ivanka, with her working woman chic, presented herself as a symbol of modern female ambition. Together, they reflected two visions of womanhood at the heart of the Trump dynasty, one rooted in elegance, the other in power. In the battle of perception, the media has always played a decisive role in shaping how Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump are remembered. American outlets, from glossy magazines to political talk shows, often placed Ivanka in the spotlight, portraying her as the sophisticated, approachable, and ambitious daughter who helped soften the often harsh image of Donald Trump. Whether standing beside her father at international summits or delivering carefully crafted speeches on women's empowerment, Ivanka was presented as the bridge between Trump's controversial persona and the more progressive, palatable face that the administration wanted to project. To many journalists, she was the modern cosmopolitan woman who could balance elegance with political relevance. Melania, by contrast, was often trapped in a colder narrative. Despite her striking beauty and undeniable presence, the press repeatedly painted her as distant, aloof, and sometimes even unwilling to embrace her role as First Lady. The label Ice Queen followed her through headlines and late-night monologues, reducing her carefully chosen silences into an emblem of detachment rather than dignity. For Melania, who valued privacy and who spoke fewer words than most of her predecessors, the media's tendency to equate quietness with indifference created a lasting struggle between perception and reality. The public, too, was deeply divided. For one group of Americans, Ivanka was overstepping, a daughter intruding into the role that by tradition and symbolism belonged to the First Lady. They saw her constant visibility and political influence as an overshadowing of Melania, a mother figure sidelined within her own household. Another group, however, viewed Melania's silence not as weakness, but as strength. To them, her refusal to play into political theater was a deliberate choice, a way of guarding her identity and protecting her son Barron from the glare of publicity. And so every headline, every photograph, every moment of contrast between the glamorous daughter and the enigmatic wife became fuel for a narrative larger than the two women themselves. The media, knowingly or not, transformed their differences into a recurring drama, one that continues to spark debate about image influence and the true meaning of power inside the Trump dynasty. Among all the comparisons between Melania and Ivanka, Trump none stirred more debate than the moments when the lines between First Lady and First Daughter seemed to blur. During Donald Trump's presidency, there were several occasions when Ivanka appeared more prominently than Melania, particularly during foreign trips and high-profile summits. Photographs of Ivanka seated at international roundtables or engaging with world leaders sparked a flurry of questions. Who is really the First Lady of the Trump White House? These images traveled across front pages and social media feeds, fueling whispers that Ivanka was in practice replacing Melania in the eyes of both domestic and global audiences. This was not just speculation, it became a narrative the media revisited time and again. Reporters noted how Melania, who preferred privacy and carefully managed her appearances, seemed absent during moments when Ivanka stepped into the spotlight. In the eyes of critics, the contrast was glaring. Ivanka leaned into visibility while Melania leaned away from it. The result was a storyline that cast them as rivals in influence, whether or not such rivalry truly existed behind closed doors. Rumors of coolness within the Trump family only deepened the intrigue. Gossip pages and political commentary alike highlighted moments when Melania and Ivanka appeared to avoid each other at public events. Cameras captured fleeting glances, stiff body language, or the conspicuous lack of interaction. To the media, these were more than coincidences, they were evidence of a frosty dynamic between stepmother and stepdaughter. Headlines screamed of tension in the Trump dynasty, magnifying the smallest gestures into proof of division. The tension reached its peak between 2018 and 2019. During this period, Ivanka was often presented by the press as the de facto public face of the Trump administration's softer side, attending events that traditionally would have been within the First Lady's domain. From state dinners to global summits, Ivanka's presence frequently overshadowed Melania's absence. For critics, it seemed as though Ivanka had taken on not only the symbolic weight, but also the ceremonial responsibilities of the First Lady, leaving Melania sidelined. To some Americans, this was scandalous, a breach of tradition that diminished the role of the First Lady and undermined Melania's dignity. To others, it was simply a reflection of personality. Ivanka thrived in the spotlight, while Melania chose to step back. Yet whichever interpretation people believed, the perception of rivalry became a powerful narrative of its own. The daughter and the wife were no longer simply two women in Trump's orbit. They were cast as emblematic opposites, locked in a quiet but very public struggle over visibility, symbolism, and legacy. The comparisons between Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump were never just about fashion, influence, or public image. At a deeper level, they were also reflections of the complicated stepmother-stepdaughter dynamic inside one of the world's most scrutinized families. Behind the carefully staged smiles and polite exchanges lay an invisible boundary shaped not only by personality differences, but also by their positions within the Trump household. For Melania, her energy and devotion centered on her son Barron. She often kept herself out of the political spotlight to safeguard his childhood from the relentless glare of the media. This maternal instinct gave her life in the White House a sense of restraint. Her priority was not expanding influence, but preserving a safe space for her child. Ivanka, on the other hand, was drawn to her father's political orbit with a natural ease. Already experienced as a businesswoman and public figure, she seamlessly transitioned into becoming Donald Trump's trusted advisor. Her bond with him was rooted in shared ambition and mutual trust, and she did not hesitate to step into arenas of power that Melania deliberately avoided. The result was an unspoken divide. Melania represented the private protective sphere of family, while Ivanka embodied the public ambitious pursuit of political influence. Though both women consistently maintained civility in public appearances, standing together at events exchanging formal gestures, observers could sense the distance. It was not open conflict, but rather the kind of quiet separation that exists when two lives move in parallel, yet rarely overlap. This invisible boundary fascinated the media and the public alike, turning every photograph and every interaction into a subject of speculation. In truth, perhaps, neither Melania nor Ivanka sought direct rivalry. Instead, their contrasting roles highlighted the complexity of blending family with politics, where maternal instincts and political ambition can coexist under the same roof, yet remain worlds apart. The contrasting roles of Melania and Ivanka Trump left behind two very different public legacies. For Melania, the persistent label was that of a passive first lady, someone who fulfilled ceremonial duties but rarely stepped into political battles. Her silence was often mistaken for detachment, and critics dismissed her as a background figure. Yet with time, some began to reinterpret her restraint not as weakness but as dignity, a quiet form of strength that prioritized family over politics. To many, she may ultimately be remembered as the First Lady who chose to protect her son and her privacy, above all else becoming a symbol of silence in an era of noise. Ivanka, on the other hand, was cast as her father's political heir, the ambitious daughter positioned as a potential successor to the Trump legacy. Her role as advisor, her visibility on the world stage, and her branding as a modern woman of influence created the image of someone preparing for a future in politics. Yet that image has also proven fragile. Despite her visibility, Ivanka has not yet fully transformed into an independent political figure. To some, her legacy is less about actual power and more about potential never fully realized. Thus, the two women stand as reflections of different choices: Melania as the guardian of family identity, Ivanka as the experiment of political inheritance. Time will continue to reshape how history judges them, but their contrast will remain one of the most striking narratives of the Trump era. The comparison between Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump is not just about fashion elegance or who has greater political influence. It is in truth a mirror reflecting the complexities of family dynamics within one of the most scrutinized households in the world and the burdens that society places on women who step into the political spotlight, whether by choice or by circumstance. In Melania, the world sees a first lady who appeared distant, perhaps reserved, but who might have been quietly exercising a unique form of power, the power of silence. Her choice not to constantly engage with the media or political games could itself be read as a statement of defiance, an act of self-preservation, or even a subtle assertion of control. She stood apart, almost untouchable, allowing mystery to become her shield. In Ivanka, the world sees an ambitious daughter who eagerly embraced her father's political orbit. She projected confidence, intellect, and modernity, carefully curating her image as a woman capable of stepping into the political arena. To some, she became the political heir, while to others she represented the blurring of family and governance. Yet despite her influence, her journey showed the challenges of carving out an independent legacy when one's identity is so deeply tied to a powerful parent. When these two figures are compared side by side, what emerges is not simply a rivalry, but a broader story, one about the roles women are expected to play in politics and the double standards they face. Melania's silence was often criticized as passivity, while Ivanka's visibility was both celebrated and condemned. Neither path was free from judgment. And so the question remains for us to consider: did Melania truly want to be compared at all, or was her silence her ultimate form of power? Was her refusal to compete a hidden victory in itself? In the end, the narrative of Melania versus Ivanka is not just about them, it is about us, the audience, and the way society demands women in power to constantly prove themselves. Now, I want to turn the question over to you. What do you think was Melania's silence weakness, or was it her quiet strength?